So I have a startup called First Sky Media Group, and we're just over on Pender Street over there. One of the things, obviously we do what you guys have witnessed is protocol. It's a really important thing to me, and if we do anything tonight, I'd love to talk with anybody about protocol and how important it is to us as Indigenous people. Thank you for inviting me up here. I also wanted to say something in our language. Imot sam swagan, chochu chapi, nishtes geja. So what I said was, I feel good. Da, 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 da. I did actually. Imot sam swagan is I feel good. The next part was, we come from this place, and we're all related, is the final words. And that's coming from the Ijutham language of the Clahuslam and Hamalko people. So also want to recognize a good friend of mine who's come into the room, and we do a lot of projects together. He's an artist, actor, and does a lot of work with Indigenous communities with Truth and Reconciliation, bringing communities together. And he's a bit shy, but I have no choice but to highlight him. And it's my good friend, Dwayne Howard back there. Thanks for coming, Dwayne. Oh, and Trevor Jang showed up, and he's another Indigenous, another Indigenous rock star. So great to be here, folks. If you ever have any questions, you want to talk to me, lots of government experience, I was on the BCFN for a couple of years. I still have to maintain my, even though I'm not elected chief anymore, I still live that life, and I have to do that. And Dwayne is my mentor, and he's the one that helps me continue on that work as being Hegus, being the chief. And so technology is really important, and with reconciliation, it's equal. It's bringing us at the table and understanding that we have the power to do this work together, because it's important to all of us. So I want to thank you for having me here, and enjoy your day, and hopefully we'll all get a chance to talk. So, Chatham Quinamay.
If I could just have a quick round of applause for the amazing leadership at here. I think this really goes to speak about the level of Indigenous talent that will show up for topics that we're passionate about, the people who will take time out of their day. All these people are so busy, and the people in the room, I know how busy you are, and I just really want to acknowledge, I love that our community rallies this way. Working in this type of work, as you know, if it's not for profit, for profit, wherever you are, it's a lot of hours in, and it's a lot of who you are. It's a lot of your time, and I just so much appreciate my colleagues, my friends, my brothers and sisters for not only coming tonight, but for agreeing at the last minute to stand with me here and to talk about this. And it's a really important. It's really important that we explore and discover and add dimension to this topic. And so just thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for coming and for agreeing at the very last minute to participate in a bit of a dialogue about this. Protocol is so important to our people. I want to give you a little bit of an understanding of how that honoring, how that respect, how that tradition translates into a world that is ever more connected, ever more digital, ever more expanding, ever more global. How do we ensure that Indigenous voices, specifically here in British Columbia, are represented in digital spaces, that we're decolonizing online spaces, that we're not recreating the inequality, the racism, the colonization, the patriarchy, the capitalism that exists in our physical lives into online spaces. That's not just an idea that we have to think about, that's happening. We know that. I think that we can all agree and you can see it in data. We understand by the way this economy is driven that data drives us. Data drives the people that control us. Indigenous people have not been, to date, a strong voice in the online space. Why is that? Why did that happen in British Columbia? How do we overcome that? Not only in British Columbia, in Canada, in North America, in the world. The entire existence of humanity rests on our ability to harness technology responsibly, correctly, that we know what we're giving up as human beings the more we rely on technology, that we know how we can implement it to advance our lives, how we can utilize it to grow our economies, how we can use it to increase social economic inclusion. That's the work of the First Nations Technology Council. We are trying to understand in British Columbia how Indigenous peoples will benefit from digital and connected technologies. On a larger, grander scale, we all in this room have to think about this as human beings, as occupiers of this planet, and as people who are of a generation, of a time, that deeply have to think about how we are going to change the trajectory of what our ancestors, collectively speaking, have done. The decisions our Canadian last 150 years has gone. What decisions have been made? We together have to unify to understand how technology plays a role to solve some of these inequalities and also the environmental challenges we have today that are happening on First Nations territory. Technology is the underpinning to so many things, as you can understand. It's pervasive, ubiquitous in your life. So of course it is in our lives too. So when you think about the digital divide in British Columbia, you have to think about at least 203 nations, some treaty, that have less than 10 megabits download speed. Can I see hands for people who understand what 10 megabits download speed means? I figured most of the room would kind of know. What can you do with 10 megabits download? Does anyone know that? Just shout it out if you do. Can you stream Netflix on 10? Can you access email?
Yeah.
Get loud, it's good. You gotta be loud. This is a discussion.
Yes, but no attachments.
Yes, but no attachments. That is exactly the answer.
Some of us like no attachments.
Some of us like no attachments. Okay, commitment. Okay, Sasha, got it. That's right. So what we're going to talk to you about tonight is exactly what the digital divide here in British Columbia looks like from the perspective of the First Nations Technology Council. We're going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing about that, but really what we want to do is have a discussion with you about why you think that matters. Why did you come tonight? Why do you want to be part of this? And what do you think that from your individual perspective, from your organizational perspective, from your ideological perspective, why do you want to see this move forward? And we're going to compel you this evening a bit about why it matters. But I'm guessing, I mean, this is a Vancouver. You came tonight to a Net2van event, so I'm guessing you don't take much convincing. We're going to help to share some of the facts about what's happening and how we can all get involved to support the movement to ensure all Indigenous people have equal, affordable, and sustainable access to digital and connected technologies. And aside from that, why does that matter? Why does that matter for reconciliation? And why does that matter for decolonization? And why does that matter as a community that we achieve that? that's what we are going to try to tackle. Lauren's going to help us with a few slides, but because I have invited a lot more people to the conversation than the slides allowed for, she may be running up and down, just want to let you know. And to give you a quick overview of why I'm sitting here as the Oprah of the conversation. My name's Denise Williams. I come from the Cowichan territory. I always say home of the best sweaters on my dad's side. And on my mom's side, and I think Lena's comment about recognizing your full identity is such an astute one. I didn't for a long time. I'm Cowichan on my dad's side, and I've always been recognized as an Indigenous woman, First Nations woman, and I've felt the ups and downs of that over my lifetime. Also important to recognize that on my mom's side, I'm Scottish, Welsh, and English. She's first generation. She moved here with her parents after the Second World War. And both of my parents have felt a lot of the impact of residential schools. So I also identify as a residential school intergenerational survivor. So that's important to recognize. I'm the executive director of the First Nations Technology Council. Have been for a while, maybe 6 years, maybe 7. I never know. 6.5. I'm the president of the Urban Native Youth Association. I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of the youth at the Urban Native Youth Association and what they've achieved. If you don't know about that organization, please get to know it. It's been around for 33 years, and it serves thousands of youth in the downtown east side in this community every year. And I have the privilege of serving on a number of different boards, nationally, provincially, and locally, to ensure that our voice is heard on matters that intersect between technology, innovation, the emerging economy, education, Indigenous rights, Indigenous sovereignty, and what our co-creation, our shared future looks like. So I wanted to make sure you had a sense of who I am and why I'm sitting here. We have a very short timeline to achieve this. So what do I mean by that? I'll give you some short form statistics. British Columbia is a very big province. It has a lot of geographical range. Good, great, yeah. So there are literally hundreds of communities that are here. 75% don't have access to Canada's current definition of broadband connectivity. So the problem with broadband as a definition is it's always been one of numbers. So for the last 14 years in British Columbia, broadband connectivity has meant 10 megabit download speed and 2 megabits up. Our challenge at the Technology Council has been over the years that our provincial government and our federal government have said 98% of communities meet the broadband connectivity standard. But that's at that rate that I told you about. You can't download PDFs, you can't do anything with that. That's because 14 years ago that was adequate. So we've had to support our provincial and federal government to understand that in British Columbia, and especially affecting First Nations, but not only First Nations, we're not all getting that. So what does that mean for BC's economy? What does it mean? You've got over 270,000 Indigenous people living in this province, probably more, who don't currently, 75 to 80% of those don't have 75 to 80% don't have access to the current CRTC standard of 50 megabits. Download, 10 up. That was just ruled in 2016. That's a basic human right. CRTC and the United Nations. That's a basic human right, basic service. Last time there was a basic service, it was the telephone. That's why. That's how essential this is to our economy. That's how essential it is to people to thrive in today's economy, to our society. So, if we have not achieved that, to that degree, that is a failing grade. If we have not achieved that to date, why is that? What happened? There has been a very incremental approach to how to connect First Nations communities around this province to the internet. Part of the reason is that we are, and I know people have heard me say this, I'll say it again, I'll say it until it's not true, we are the only G7 country that does not have a national broadband strategy, and that's shameful. The reason that we are not able to achieve full connectivity at affordable, sustainable prices is in part because we have major telcos that have a monopoly over all of Canada. So why do First Nations communities not get connected? We're not a business case. We're not a business case. It's millions of dollars to connect through fiber, aerial or trenched fiber, to a tiny community out in Kincombe that has maybe 100 people. Why would you connect them? They're not paying subscribers. And you should know that our federal government also doesn't have any way of supporting Indigenous people in First Nations communities to pay for their internet service. So in First Nations communities, unless your nation can broker because you have a resource development project, or you're urban, or you're on somebody's list to connect, it's not going to happen. So the First Nations Technology Council has undertaken a plan to create an Indigenous digital strategy that will see all of this province get connected. But not only that, it's bigger than that. Because the goal isn't to connect everybody to a TELUS subscribership. In New Zealand, they launched an Aboriginal rights and title case. For those of you that aren't familiar with that, what that means, it means that there are Indigenous rights of people before settlers came, before colonization, that were negotiated and are in original Confederation documents, that whether it is traditional rights to land, sea, I'm arguing air, that we have the rights to these things before colonization. And you have probably heard about and seen Crown court cases where Indigenous people have been successful in arguing this. Spectrum is a complicated construct. But I think it's really important that as Canadians, we think about what Indigenous people are owed in terms of spectrum allocation. It's not all about us accessing the internet. The reason I'm saying this is because I don't want to give the impression that we just want access to TELUS TV for $100 a month and wireless services. I believe that Indigenous people have a right to these things as part of our original, traditional rights on these territories. So you will hear a lot of these things coming from the First Nations Technology Council. You'll hear a little bit about what we're doing about it, but I wanted to give you a sense. Reconciliation in a digital age means, for us, full access to the tools, to the ways of communication, to the entire online world that has now formed and the future that that's going to bring. And that's what we are fighting for. And it's a shame that we're fighting for that. We're fighting for that equality. And if you've ever gone online and wondered why you haven't seen the voices of Indigenous people, why you've seen a lot of stuff about us but not by us, if you've ever wondered, why you don't see as many Indigenous technologists or Indigenous startups in the tech sector, this is why. those nations are missing the basic access. So I love to sit here and talk about the Technology Council's programs that are about creating innovators and entrepreneurs and technologists, but we're starting from literally 250,000 people that have the access of what it is at P3 of Pacific Center Mall. You can't create nation-to-nation relationships and governance with that. You can't be an entrepreneur in the digital space with that. You can't access e-health. You can't access online education. You can't be part of it. You know what I mean? I'm going over the point. But I think it's really important that you understand how many people are affected by that. So reconciliation in digital age is about access. It's also about the ability to use those technologies, how Indigenous peoples see that coming together. We have to co-create that. It cannot be about government telling the nations how they're going to use technology. It can't be about industry influencing how nations are going to use that technology. It's about our people designing, implementing, and ensuring that that technology is about the advancement of our nations, of our people, of our way of life. And that's what we are trying to build. I think it's important that we have different voices on this topic. And that's why I was so enthusiastic to invite so many people to join. One of the people that you've heard is Lauren Kelly, and she has been part of the Technology Council from the very beginning. I like to think of us as just two girls in the garage trying to build something in our early 20s. We're kind of the Steve Jobs and Wozniak of our space, I think. It wasn't easy. The council didn't have any support or any resources. And I always think it's important for people to know that Lauren stuck by me and by the council through some very difficult times, always believed in the vision, always believed in what this could be, and still sits with me here today. And I think it's important for everyone to hear the voice of a settler aspiring ally who has put in a lot of time to this topic, and to help to open up some dialogue about what this means and what this means to all of us, and to hear from her her perspective. So I'm going to hand it off.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of kind of where to start. I think about the Technology Council and its change and growth over the last 5 years, and there has been a distinct shift. When 5 years ago, when we were trying to write proposals and get into meetings, and I think a lot about actually. It was about 4.5 years ago, and Denise, you'll remember we had the opportunity. We got extended an invitation to meet with a minister for, I think we had 15 minutes. So nervous. Neither of us had ever presented in front of a minister. So we spent hours preparing. We'd had handouts, we had folders. And we really needed a shift in government support at that time because the council didn't have it. And so, I'm bringing this up in terms of how this fits into the context of the reconciliation and the government's commitment to that. So at that time, that's about what we got. We went in, had our 15 minutes, left a folder, and not a lot resulted from that. Here we are today. The Technology Council has the support of government now, both provincial and federal. Our digital skills programming is launching this year. There's a lot of invitations for Denise's voice to be in the room. And so I think it's really important to talk about how it is the commitment of people holding government accountable to make sure that there is equity. And I think that the Technology Council has been in this space of shifting times, and even to the point of being in this room and having a conversation about reconciliation and decolonization and what that means. I've been participating in these conversations for about 10 years now, and the movement forward. But I think that it's really important as we're having these conversations to really come at them critically and be thinking about, you know, what does reconciliation mean, and also what does decolonization mean, and how can we decolonize ourselves. So that's a big, important part of it, is that this is a relationship, and that relationship's not going to shift unless we look at things like white privilege and the systems of power that we operate in, and how can we make those shifts. So, you know, in the context of your own life, as you're hearing about what this exclusion and lack of access has meant for Indigenous communities, be thinking about the spaces and the rooms in which you operate, where you can be bringing that message forward, and be thinking about your own life and how you can participate. So I think they'll start with that, and I'll have some more thoughts later, I'm sure.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm going to ask for a couple comments if anyone on the panel is thinking about anything, wants to add anything to that, including some questions, some discussion points. And at the same time, I would really love you to utilize the cards you have and to pass them to Kathy, who will come around and gather those in a few minutes, or now, or yeah. And just anything you have, just please pass it forward. They're anonymous, and I just think that it's important for us to have that time. So in the meantime, I'd just like to pass it to the panel, and then we'll address some of those questions, and then we'll move into another topic.
As I said when I started, I'm here in a private capacity, and also listening and learning. But one of the things that occurred to me when I was listening to you speak of Aboriginal rights and title and treaty, and you know, the promise of the air and what's contained in that, and it just made me kind of realize that what's happening now on the broadband and technological front is very similar to a form of rationing.
Of like problem solving, right? I think we all know that creativity comes from a bunch of things, especially like people who are like microdosing in Silicon Valley. Our people, hey, did some of the vision questing stuff a long time ago and came up with some really amazing ideas too. So just acknowledge that they come from different spaces, and just about the listening and bridging, because we can actually really, really help solve a lot of things. And so that can go in the technological space. So.
I just wanted to add to that, some of the tools that are being developed with digital democracy are actually thanks to and because of the Indigenous communities that are actually telling us and directing us exactly what they need and exactly what they want and exactly how they want to use things. And it's actually really challenging. I'm new to the org, but the org has been doing this work for a while, and it's been it's an interesting thing, like connecting economy to this. Like, it's hard to find funders to support the development of technologies that operate the way that Indigenous communities want them to operate, because it's not centering a product that's outputting towards something that's marketable. These are communities that are trying to find ways to hold knowledge or make observations on their land and then make autonomous decisions on that land, protecting the data and deciding what gets released and when. And where's the marketability in that? It doesn't exist. Very, very, very rare and exceptional funders are putting money behind this. And so it's also part of the conversation when we talk about developing spaces for stories or tools or how things get engaged, is reconsidering how resources get distributed to be able to make those things possible. Just wanted to raise that.
Got another question here I'll take a shot at. Recognizing the importance of protocols, how would you suggest we can do land acknowledgement in a webinar? That's a really good question. It just goes back to breaking down into some simple ideas. And it comes down to respect. So if you're in a cyberspace, it seems kind of weird because I just had the question today with one of my contractors who said to me, where are we doing our work? We're doing web development, and the question came from the accountants that said, where are we billing our GST to? How is this going to work? We're doing our work online, virtually. So where is it? Where are we actually delivering our product? And so I had to say to him, well, that's a pretty gray area. Well, that's the same for territories as well. So if you're online and you're on a webinar, the biggest thing you can do is do your research before you go on, and to understand where you are. If you're in San Francisco or if you're in Toronto, then you tell the group, I'm in that territory. I'm in the territory of the Cowessess First Nation and Treaty 4 territory. Just want to acknowledge that. And you ask other people to do the same thing. Really simple. And any Indigenous people that might be on the webinar, they're going to respect you for that, and they're going to understand what you're doing. So it's the simple gestures that matter the most. It's really easy.
I'm just going to throw a plug in for nativeland.ca. I'm on the board, and if you want to look up your territory, you can do that, or indianhorse.ca/next150, on whose land you can also look up with that app.
I just wanted to make a real quick comment on inclusive online presence and to tell a 30-second story. I was walking down to a meeting downtown today, and I passed, it was at lunchtime, and there was this one very well-dressed young man sitting there with his cell phone and a pita, and he was taking a picture of it, and he was super concentrated. Yeah, and he was like super, he was going to Insta it, right? And I was like, don't like that shit. Like that is, when you think about what gets that presence and online technology, which, mainstream talks about the democratization, right? And it brings out sort of some of those narcissistic qualities or self-reinforcing qualities, and then you have all this amazing content. Like he'll get 50 likes on that, and then you know what I mean? It's also those choices. And I think about what we're exposed to online. We now have, there's the term filter bubble. And I think about what your own personal algorithm is, because when we say we don't have presence of Indigenous people, I mean, you don't see my feed. It's like I'm like, it's the choices you made, and in a way, your own personal algorithm led you here tonight to have these experiences. And I've done a little bit of work with Reconciliation Canada as well, and it is about creating those relationships and moving past your own discomfort of the unfamiliar to create opportunities for connection and learning like that. And so that's how I try to think about it. Is what I know that even in my path, and I try to be a very inclusive person, that I'm still making choices where I'm not having the experiences that would expand me. So I just wanted to make that comment of what, and also just one other thing in terms of representation online. When you see something online that's racist or homophobic or sexist or showing cruelty or showing violence, don't just let it go by. I mean, I can't even tell you how many things I've gotten taken down, Indigenous or not, or that we should own that space. That space does belong to everybody, and again, because it is, people can make content without that editorial oversight, which also had its paternalistic difficulties, right? That oftentimes the people most active are those who are expressing those unformed, reactionary populist ideas.
Thank you, Sasha. And she didn't mention what, but I think it's important to recognize you for making spaces on this territory more safe for women, for Indigenous people, for all people, because of how deeply I know you walk the talk of that. So thank you. And it starts with PITAs, and it ends with changing the system. So that's what we're talking about here. Oh, yeah, great. Thank you. Join the conversation. I'm coming over. Oh, yeah, it's a good voice.
I just wanted to highlight that there are other resources out there. So if you're doing territorial acknowledgements and you're a little bit nervous about pronunciation just because
Thank you. Thank you. Those resources are so important. You know, these are online resources, and thank you to Lena for raising the 150 Indian Horse Project. The Technology Council does have a challenge on there for you to test your internet speeds, upload them, and share a fact to social media about digital inequality in Canada. It's really helpful if you do. And so, you know, going home and doing a speed test is really quick, and it'll shock you when you know, we've talked about here tonight about the 10 megabits or less that First Nations communities have. When you test that at home, many of you will see 50 or higher. We're going to do a couple more questions, and then Kathy will come collect some others that you've been writing down, that you've been thinking about. We'll do a little bit more of a chat after that. But first, I want to address just this one piece about elders. So Indigenous elders and non-Indigenous elders who may be facing some resistance to this. And this is, you know, I'm really blessed in my work to be able to visit so many communities and to sit in front of First Nations chiefs on a regular basis and listen to the concerns of those communities. I can share that I understand what the concern from Indigenous elders and non-Indigenous elders is around the integration of digital and connected technologies into their communities, onto their lands, into their language, cultural practices, traditions. I myself am, as I say, from Cowichan. We have a big house culture. I know what it is to be in the big house with my family, with my friends, going through those protocols, going through those traditions, honoring those that are getting their names, and reconnecting with the land and the place they come from. I see how cell phones and Facebook and other things can become pervasive and in the way of connecting to who we are. I think the important thing to recognize is that digital and connected technologies, I'll make this short, digital and connected technologies were introduced to our nations by the government originally. And I think it's important to understand that those technologies were introduced for First Nations' ability to report to the federal government, to Indian and Northern Affairs Canada. So that relationship to technology, to report to a colonizing government, is a negative relationship with that tool. And I'm not saying that all elders have that memory or that's the issue. It isn't. But I think it's important to recognize that that's how digital technologies came to many of our nations, and that is a pervasive tool that suggests assimilation and ongoing colonization. It has turned into a digital colonization. And our elders question if that's what's happening. That's not wrong. That's not wrong. And so I think, thank our Indigenous and non-Indigenous elders for reminding us, I think we all do, about what matters in life, because it gets easy to forget. And I think our values, our shared values, our ways of being with each other, our connectivity as human beings is critical. It's critical for us, it's critical for our planet, just for our day-to-day well-being. So we have to, I think that we share the responsibility to prove to our Indigenous and non-Indigenous elders that we can create that connectivity, that responsible, cohesive humanity that's about responsibility, that's about caring for each other, it's about caring for this land together in that space. And I think that they're right to think that if we can't achieve that, then we shouldn't do it. So I just wanted to say that to that question. Others may have other thoughts. Lena, yes? And then we'll join, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add one quick thing. Our population is also over-surveilled. So when it comes to fighting for our land and our rights, our title, our traditional ways of being, just operating places of Sundance, as if you guys remember Guffson Lake, and Oka, just protecting lands from golf courses being built, that there's also this hesitation and acknowledgement that we're not secure and that we're over-surveilled. And so Indigenous peoples are over-surveilled, Black people, obviously people who are immigrants and newcomers, and those things have to be really protected too. So there are some friends and some resources. If you come contact me afterwards, there are some people working on this kind of work. I'm not one of them, but I do have contacts in that area if you're more interested. They've been developing and designing tools as well as security webinars for people who are in over-surveilled communities. So.
I recognize we're getting short on time. I'm going to have Lauren say a few words about a question that she's just received and some thoughts she has, and then we're going to move from there, and we'll attempt to close up close to on time, but there will be opportunities to chat afterward.
Thanks. Yeah, this question and just sitting here has really got me thinking about how we come to these conversations, and we keep coming back to it about how we have to see ourselves in this conversation, and that it's not about coming to events and putting Indigenous people on a stage and asking them to teach us things. You know, that's emotional labor, and we have to see ourselves in the conversation. So I just really want to encourage everybody to bring forward those questions about allyship and how you actually participate in it. I think that learning, about the lived experience and asking the questions of the panel is great, and it's definitely a conversation that we need to have, but it's essential that, we really see our own actions and our own selves in how we participate in this. And what got me thinking about this was the question is, are there organizations assisting the First Nations Technology Council in their mission? And I'm happy to say, yeah, we have got a lot of support right now. There's a lot of education institutes, technology companies supporting us. And it's not easy. I think that that's an important part of the reconciliation, decolonization conversation, is that there's definitely a commitment of people. Obviously, everybody here in this room, you came wanting to learn about this and participate in this. It's going to be learning as you go. It's going to be sharing those conversations about how you do it. And I often say to our team, when we're bumping up against something, with a tech company, and an unsafe situation arises for, say, a student, where they feel really excluded or racism against them. And I say what we're trying to do as the Technology Council is reconciliation on that daily basis. And so I think that I just really wanted to encourage everybody to not sit back and be learning about Indigenous people, but also be learning about yourselves as settlers. It's also an important part of the learning. So, thanks.
Thanks, Lauren. And like I say, Lauren is an amazing resource. She belongs to the Hive Board of Directors, so as someone who you might see around here. And I really encourage any questions you might have that feel awkward in this situation, ask them. But if you're not sure, ask Lauren afterwards, and she can still chat with you. I'd like to hand it over to James to invite an important voice to the floor and to the discussion.
Thanks, Denise. I didn't mean to hijack the meeting, but I'm just glad that everybody's here and discussing things. And I think it'd be great to have these questions. Like we could almost put it on the website or in the Facebook group that was started. I was kind of hoping to invite my good friend, artist and actor Dwayne Howard to, if he's into it, have a few words, and would love to hear from him. And I do this on a regular basis, put him on the spot, and so he can beat me later. But Dwayne, if you would do us the honor of coming up, and if you had some words, we'd really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you too.
I'll take her seat. Good evening. Everybody stand up. Stand up. Except me. Okay, stretch. You've been sitting for the last hour, probably longer. Okay, sit down. Now that I got your full attention, you all listened and stood up. But anyway, I can become a comedian once in a while, James. My name is Dwayne Howard. I come from the Nuu-chah-nulth Nation, Tlingit, Kwakiutl, and but I've been residing here in Vancouver for the last probably 35 years. Kind of basically, this is my home now. And I just found out, like about 15 years ago, that I got connections with the Squamish. So I'm a little bit Squamish in me. And but no, you know, it's really great to hear all this. I've been coming across a lot of this since my achievement and my success in my life of where I come from, and also as myself, residential school survivor, know what it's like, you know. For me, reconciliation for me. When I think about it, like when it first came out, I was really fighting with myself with it, and decolonization. You know, when I look at these things, anything that happens in life, a lot of our people go within. They go within before they take it up here, right? They process what they're feeling, what they're thinking, right? Even before it came to the floor, the families would have a discussion before it got brought out to the community. You know, so there was ways, talking about protocols of what they did in the longhouses, in the teepees, in the hogans, you know, down in Navajo, you know, country. And even that, I have a Navajo brother down there in Steamboat, Arizona. He said the Navajos used to travel up here to BC, you know. And so you look at our land, somebody talked about land issues. But getting on back to reconciliation, you know, I tell people in order to move forward, we have to change our own dialogue within ourselves. No, we have to change our own dialogue within ourselves. You know, I tell people, you know, change is going to happen. Change always happens. My grandfather used to say, change is going to come, but don't lose your values in life. Don't lose those principles and laws of what we pass down to you. Don't lose those. I say this too because you look at it in a religion, spiritual way, kind of like all religions and spiritual people, they talk about being humble. They talk about love, they talk about compassion, and that's where all of our people are, all across the world, no matter who you are, right? So that's why I tell people, you know, change that process within yourself, and you know, and my grandfather said too, he says, you know, he said, pick up the white man tools. Pick them up. Learn. But don't be like them. You know? Like I said, remember your traditions and your values, right? What he meant by that was always be humble, always be respectful, always be kind, considerate, never judge anybody. Despite what happens in life, always be there for others, because that's the way our people lived a long time ago. I sit down and I talked with my dad and my uncles and everybody of how was it when you guys were growing up? You know? And they said, it was beautiful. So when you look at it now, it's like we're literally relearning our old ways. When you think about it. We're just relearning our old ways. We all have a story. We all have a history. We all have something to offer each other. So I tell people, be open-minded about it. Trust the process in life. Now, I was really raised, I didn't know none of my culture because I grew up on Main and Hastings. I moved here when I was 14. Did 13 years on that street, Main and Hastings. Changed my life 32 years ago. I didn't know nothing about my way of life. I wasn't educated. No, I didn't know my language. Now I'm learning our language. So I tell people it's never too late. And I work with the Fraser Health Team. I work with Native Health Society. No, I'm a motivational speaker. I travel around constantly. You know, I go into communities and I help out the best way I can. You know, we all can make a difference within ourselves, right? But it's up to you, really, to want to make that change. You know, because we need to, because the Hopi prophet says the 7th generation is going to make that change in that way. And it's here. We're sitting here. We're sitting here making that difference today. You know, and life is beautiful, but today, you know, when I look at today, it's our women, our backbones of our people that are moving us forward. And that's the way how it was in the longhouse system, the smokehouse system. That's the way it was in the teepee system. The women were protected. They were protectors. And that's the way it was with the Navajos and the Hogans down there. You know. So it's amazing, you know, when you know, I don't know nothing about you people. I know nothing about you, right? But I need to educate myself on that, right? And so I tell people that, you know, how many of you know your great-grandparents? How many of you know your great-grandparents? Wow. I ask that all the time. My great-grandfather, Lewis Howard, from Sitka, Alaska. My grandmother comes, great-great-grandmother comes from Hesquit, Newfoundland Territories. So now you see what I'm saying? So I tell people, educate yourself first before you can really understand us. That's what needs to be done. Educate yourself first. Your history of who your people are, where they're from. The spiritual content of their life or their religion. 10 to 1, it comes back to that way of life of just loving one another, appreciating one another, right? Because we all got, I was in Ireland, and they told me their story about what they went through the English and the Scotlands. And I was like, wow, really? It's just like what we went through over here. So we've all experienced this. But why do our First Nations people stand out? The reason why we stand out is because this is our homeland. That's why we stand out. It's a whole Turtle Island, whole North America. This is our homeland. That's why we stick out. No. So territorial rights all across North America. We owned the land. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. I didn't know you were in the room. I'm slightly embarrassed that you've been here the whole time. And I hope everyone knows the wisdom and the gift that you've just received here this evening. Thank you so much. Yeah. And of course, to our panel, just thank you so much again for being here and sharing your insights. These are really important people to know, from our territories, who are allies, who are from these territories, who are from all over North America, all over the world, who call this place home, and it is important. It is important because these are our territories, and to a large degree, we are invisible on these territories, and we're all trying to learn about each other. And this is a critical conversation, and so thank you for showing up to it. Thank you for being part of it, and encourage you to connect with my friends, my colleagues, my brothers and sisters that are here on the stage, and thanks for being here. And I hope that we can continue the conversation in other ways. Haichka, Osiam. And thank you, Eli, for inviting this conversation and continuing the conversation after so many invitations to be part of your community. So thanks for having us here. Thank you. Thank you.
And I just wanted to add one last note, another piece of wisdom. I always remember my mentor, my elder, saying to me, and I would say to you as well, don't be afraid of being successful. Don't be afraid of your own success. It's in you being successful and bringing others with you and bringing your values. So in the same way that we're all looking to be successful in our way, just want to say don't hold back, but do it in the right way. So I really wish everybody here who's joined together in this community, I hope your dreams come true. I hope our dreams come true, and I hope that gets shared.
Thank you, Sasha. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you at Darby's.